Cleveland Church of God is on 11th Street, and take a swing a left and go right up parallel to the railroad track to Brown Stoveworks. You know that big turn?
Yep. Where the
right there where
it says a physical plant.
Yeah. It's the Lee University physical plant now.
Yeah.
Back then, that's where I lived. I lived in that right where you made the turn down there. We lived in a little house, flooded every time that creek was over.
Was you across the railroad track?
No, we were on this side of the railroad track. We were the last house before it made the turn and went up.
And that's Railroad Street too, I think, isn't it?
Pardon?
Is that Railroad Street?
Yeah, it's Railroad Street farther down, like on 8th, where 8th crosses the railroad tracks. 8th Street crosses the railroad tracks, and that's Railroad Street over there. But then this was a little farther toward Brown Stoveworks. There was nothing that crossed the railroad tracks. It was a big hill. Railroad tracks are a big hill. I grew up climbing that hill to cross over the railroad tracks, which, of course, my mother hated it for us to do because she's afraid we'd climb up there and run out in front of a train.
But you can see a train.
Yeah.
I don't know. I never could understand the.
I know, but you know, she was right in a way because you know what we loved to do in those days. We loved to we did get a penny and put it on the railroad track. Did you ever do that?
Oh yeah.
So that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we also, in those days, there was no such thing as a throwaway Coke bottle or canned Coke. It was all old-fashioned bottles.
Yeah, you got
you got the plastic things now, you know. But
now you got to go to Michigan, Maine.
You had deposit. You could get deposit. So boys could run around and find Coke bottles that had been discarded.
Like a nickel or a penny.
That's right. Yeah. Gather them all up and take them to a grocery store, and they'd buy them from you, 2 or 3 cents.
When I worked at Cook's, I used to take in the used bottles and rack them, we used to call.
Well, by the time I worked as a grocery boy too, you know, but I worked at Toby's. I'm too old for Cook's. I'll tell you about Toby's.
Now, I remember Toby used to give me quarters.
Yeah.
When it was tip-top.
That's right.
But you were
all right,
at
so
Toby's.
We're kind of jumping around here, but when I was a boy growing up, Toby Taylor, that's Scott Taylor's uncle, Bobby Taylor's brother.
My brother, Bo, is named after Toby Taylor.
Is that right?
Bo Taylor Burris. But go ahead.
Toby ran a grocery store over here right across the street from Broad Street Methodist Church, right? Mm-hmm. And it was bustling, and it was, you know, they delivered on bicycles. That was my first job away from delivering papers. Worked for Toby's. Mm-hmm. Toby had a hellacious fire one night. I mean, it burned down the whole.
About what year?
Well, I was working there, and that means I was in about, I would have been about 14 or 15 years old, which I was born in 45, so it would have been about 1960, 62, and through there somewhere. I graduated Bradley High School in 63. So this is when I was in high school, so that was big. So anyway, burned the thing down, burned it down to nothing. And so he rented a space down over here by 5 Points, right next to the railroad tracks. What we called 3 Points in those days. I haven't heard anybody call it that in a long time, but and reestablished his store over there. And then I worked there for a while. Well, then he sold that at some point, and that was torn down. The pad is still there. I go by there all the time. Next to the Elks Club there.
I've seen that pad.
Yeah,
so that was Toby
Taylor's pad. There's a piece of concrete there, yeah. That was the floor of Toby's food store after the fire.
Is that right?
He moved out of there and came out here to Tip Top. So he started Tip Top Food.
I wonder why he changed the name.
I don't know. I always wondered, you know, Toby's worked for me. But so one of my first job, other than delivering papers, I was a paper boy for both Times Free Press, in those days just the Free Press, and the Cleveland Daily Banner. And my first job where I actually went and showed up to work and got paid was Toby's food store. And I worked there for several years. And I bagged groceries, carried them out to the cars, you know. when I was lucky, I would put stock up. You know, we love to put up stock because you can fool around a little bit.
An air conditioner.
Yeah, if you're out there at the front, and the guy that kind of ran the front, you know Reggie Law?
I remember Reggie.
Reggie Law's daddy.
Okay.
We called him Mr. Law. I don't know what his name was. He was kind of like, man, he ran that front of the store. He ran a cash register, and there'd be 2 or 3 other running cash registers up there. And our job was to sit there and stack up, you know, bags of groceries and carry them out for the customers.
They'd pull up to the door, just like.
Well, they would, or they'd just park over there. We'd have to hump them out there to their car.
Yeah.
But part of the service you got then was you come up and buy your groceries, and they'd put them in bags, and a bag boy, they called us, would take them out to your car for you. Now that was hard work.
Yeah.
You were running all the time. If it was raining, you were running out in the rain. If it was hot, you were running out in the heat. And it never let up. You were carrying these bags of groceries. So what we like to do is put up stock. You know, that way you kind of disappear back in the store somewhere with one of the older employees. And then they'd cut open, you know, they'd have a box cutter and cut open a box of, you know, with 24 cans of beans, and you put the beans up on the shelf. Man, that's what we wanted to do. So we try to get back in there, because then you could kind of fool around, take it a little easier, and it was warm in the wintertime and cool in the summertime.
You know, speaking of the train, that have you ever seen this book, in Rott's Time?
No, you know, that's the guy that had the tunnel?
He's the guy that supposedly had the tunnel.
Yeah,
and he was like the richest guy.
Book. Yeah.
Well, I got a copy from Amazon. I actually got it signed by the guy that wrote the book.
Right.
But he talks about how they called him Rat in Rat's Time. That's like from 1850 to 1870 was
through the war.
Rat's. Yeah, in fact, when the war came, he learned how to smelt the ore.
Yeah.
And they were actually chasing him to hang him for being a war criminal. But he's the one that brought the railroad.
Well, now, did he ever find his tunnel? They say he had a tunnel.
I think it's there. Yeah, it's there, they say. But some people say it was for payroll. Some people say it was an underground railroad.
Yeah.
Some people say it was, so I don't know. I'd love to see it.
I
I know the house is still there.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Speaking of rail trail, anyway, I grew up over there by the railroad tracks. We had, when I was a little boy, I lived next door to the railroad tracks on this side. You know what? There was 3 big dividing lines in Cleveland in those years. There was the railroad track running north-south.
Yeah.
Then there was Parker Street.
Why Parker?
Well, because it was, cars went fast and it was kind of wide. And
that was
it was just a dividing line. Then, of course, there was Ocoee Street. Now, Ocoee Street was U.S. Highway 11. So if you drove from Knoxville to Birmingham or Atlanta, that's what came right through town, right through the courthouse square, right down to where the monument is, and went down Broad Street on out that way.
Yeah.
No interstate in those days. So Ocoee Street was a big divider. Parker was a big divider. The railroad track then was a big divider. So all of us that lived on that side, east of Ocoee Street, kind of felt like we were part of the same community, because we all went to Mayfield, and the people over
which was where the old location.
Yeah, it's Old Mayfield School, which is now part of the Lee campus.
Yeah.
We called it Mayfield Annex, but we haven't done a thing to it.
Yeah.
We intend to spend some money and you know, gotta make that look better outside. But Mayfield School sat there for all those years. When I was growing up, it was the neighborhood school of all this territory from Ocoee Street east, across the railroad tracks and up to the top of the hill, you know. And that's where all of us went to school. Now, if you were from Ocoee Street west, you went to Arnold. And so that became one of these sociocultural dividing lines.
Which is silly, but a fact.
Oh, it was absolutely a fact. It was as real as any boundary, you know, east and west Berlin.
And it was basically because of the cost of real estate, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And the factory workers, as you went farther east, of course, you had more and more of these workers that worked at Magic Chef in those days. You know,
Yeah.
before that they called it Dixie Foundry. But Brown Stoveworks. Well, those plants down there. The plants were all east of town, and people tended to live around those, where they could walk to those plants.
Yeah.
Jobs. Now, you get west of town, you've got the nicer homes and nicer neighborhoods, and you've got the people that own businesses downtown. And of course, there were no kind of northern suburbs like we have now. All these
What
developments.
did that just like fade out from the same thing that it was, but just fade out?
No, it's still there. As a matter of fact.
I mean, when you go after you, I mean.
When I say it's still there, I mean there's still a.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
It's more than just a street. It's an attitude. And that's still, it's broken down a lot. And when I say it was still there, but there's still, if you stand on Old Coy Street, let's say you stand at the monument, because that's a point of reference. Everybody's arguing about the monument these days, but you know what I'm talking about. That's still a point of reference, right?
Yeah.
You just start walking east, and you walk right through on 11th, let's say on the 8th Street. 8th Street right there, the monument's at 8th Street. I also lived on 8th Street for a while. You'll go right down through the Lee campus, and as you leave the Lee campus, you'll get to the railroad tracks. You cross that track and you keep going, and it's like taking a walk through my childhood and through my history. Matter of fact, I did it not long ago. A couple of years ago, we were having a big celebration at Lee, but Lee had grown up, I went over there and walked through all that stuff just to refresh my memory. But let's go back to the railroad tracks. Man, I hear that train whistle to this day. Now, I could be driving back over on this end of town today and hear the train whistle coming through down there, and it tell you it's this rich.
Why you're saying it's like music to your ear?
Yeah.
And why is that? Was it a point in your life that was happy, or
well, it was from the time I was a little boy. My earliest memories, I was laying awake at night, and those trains had come through there at night. Now, they came through in the daytime too. You just didn't pay much attention to them. You were doing something.
Yeah, you're busy.
But when you would remember those train whistles is at night, because now I'm really an old man here. You have to pardon all the old man talk. But before air conditioning, everybody had their windows open on those summer nights. It's hot. You have a window fan, baby.
Yeah.
People don't hear the train whistles as much anymore because they're all buttoned up in their car and they're all buttoned up in their houses.
And the houses are more sound too.
Of course. Anyway, there's something about that train whistle, and I'll be sitting over on a park bench on the Lee campus right now, and that train will come through, and I'll have this real nostalgic feeling. Matter of fact, it's kind of a joke at commencements, at Lee commencements, which are outdoors, the May commencement. We'll almost never have a commencement when we don't get interrupted by the train.
Yeah.
And whatever it is you're saying, if you're up at the microphone making a speech or calling out some student's name, you might as well just shut up for about 12 or 15 seconds, because that train whistle is so loud, and it gets
because it's whistling at the intersection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right there, as you cross there at 8th Street, there isn't an underpass. You going over there to Inman, there's an underpass, right? No problem.
Yeah.
Trains up there, the cars are going under here. You get the next place down where the street crosses the railroad track is 8th Street. And there is no underpass. There's an arm comes down and, God willing, a light flashes.
Or you see it.
Yeah. But, and so on farther down. So the train whistle was for a very good reason, when a train would be coming down through there. And sometimes the train stopped in Cleveland, of course, but usually it didn't.
And at one time, now the depot, when did they stop stopping there? Or do you remember?
I don't know, but it would have been sometime in the 60s. because we still had passenger traffic in there into the early 60s when I was in high school. And somewhere in about the 60s, I think if you probably looked it up, it's somewhere in the 60s. And it dwindled down like everything else. Got to where there was only, like 5 passenger trains a day, and then it's down to 3, and then it's down to 1, and then it gets to where there's no passenger service at all. What? Now, occasionally a freight train will stop there for some reason, waiting for something to happen. But the freight trains would just whistle through there even when I was a boy, because you got to where you knew it was a freight train or a passenger train. Passenger train's a lot more interesting because you look in and see the people, Mm-hmm. That's probably where I got to be a Johnny Cash fan. I hear that train it's coming around the bend.
I could be sunshine. It would take that much for me to be a hobo.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah. Well, did you ever climb up on any those freight cars would come through and they had big old sliding doors on both sides, and when they were empty, they'd leave those sliding doors open.
Yeah.
And the train would slow down when it come through little towns like Cleveland just for safety purposes. Mm-hmm. Didn't usually just keep whistling, it'd slow down. And you could run along and jump up in one of those freight cars.
And during the Depression, they used to throw succotash off.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm too young for that, but I do know that you could run alongside and jump up in a freight car. But the problem is going to be that thing's not going to go slow very long.
No, and how do you get off?
That's the problem. So when that freight train would slow down to come through Cleveland, and you're a little boy, and you could run along and jump up in there, and it was dangerous. Of course it was dangerous.
Yeah.
But you're stupid young kids. You got to feel when that thing's starting, when you've either been on there long enough, or if it starts to pick up a little speed, you better go in a hurry, or you're going to be in that train till it gets to Cartersville or somewhere.
Yeah, and that could be, you may not be able to get off. Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, the train, man, the train was a part of our lives, those of us that live over to East Cleveland. I'll talk this way to some of these, my friends, who grew up over here around Arnold or west of town. They don't know what I'm talking about because they never went close to the railroad track. That was kind of off over there somewhere, off over there.
They could still hear it.
Oh, yeah. You can hear it all the way. You can hear it all the way to where I live now, which is out in western, development.
Yeah. I grew up at my grandmother's on Harl and Willow, and I remember waking up in the mornings and I could hear it.
Yeah.
And that and the smell of, I guess, honeysuckles or katydid, and hearing the katydids.
Yeah. Well, I love the train. I love it to this day, and I love hearing it. And tell you another thing, talk about those sounds that take you back to your childhood. It's church bells. And you don't think of it around Cleveland because all these churches now are out in these subdivisions. And so you go to First Baptist or First Methodist or Westmore Church of God. There's no, it's not really in a community. But as a boy growing up in Cleveland, Cleveland was a city of churches, and these churches had bells. And as a little boy, I grew up over there by the railroad track. The big treat was to walk to town, around the courthouse square, and that's where all the shopping was. And you get a little money, you get a quarter, and you go downtown and you can spend it. Or walking back and forth in that town, you could hear the church bells. There were bells at Broad Street. Now, there's no longer bells at Broad Street.
Now, did it ring at the time that church started?
No, they would ring at various times, like 6 o'clock in the evening. Different ones I would
ring. It didn't matter when church was started?
No, it had nothing to do with church. It was just a certain time. All right, Broad Street had bells. First Presbyterian had bells. As a matter of fact, that old church bell from First Presbyterian is now sitting in the yard. They took it out of the bell. Yeah, they built a little platform for it. So this is the bell that was up in the church tower. St. Luke's had bells.
What was the point of that?
It's just a tradition.
I mean, but why church?
I don't know.
I mean, why not a barber shop?
Well, I don't know, because churches had belfries. You know, they had steeples.
Yeah.
So a barber shop, you might be one level, but all these churches and the way they built churches nowadays always had a steeple, and so they had a high place to put it. And I think
and so more people could hear it.
Sure, and I think it was associated with going to church originally. But now they've got now. So when we started building around Lee, I wanted some bells up in there somewhere, and we've got 2 great sets of bells on our campus now, and people that live over in that neighborhood love those bells, and I love to hear them. One is in the Student Union building, which was built in the year 2000, so it's now 20 years old. Those bells we got those bells from an Anglican church in London. They were hung there in the 1930s, before the Second World War. Now, I love to think about those bells. There's a big tolling bell, bong, tolls the hour, bong, bong, and then there's 4 what they call Westminster bells. It's ding, 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 ding. Okay, those bells were in this church in the 1930s. They hung in this church all through the Blitz when London was being bombed by the Nazis. They were a part of that church. Now, I love to think about that. Well, what happened has happened all across England and Europe. These old churches would go bust. You know, they would lose their people. They would tear the church down. Well, these beautiful bells that were cast in those days will get bought and then resold. So there's a big business in repurposed bells.
I bet, yeah.
And the company that we got those from is a company in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, this company, which is a foundry that casts their own bells, but they'll go over and get these old bells from these old churches and probably pay nothing for them. Probably just, if you get them and get them off the property, you have them. Yeah. Bring them over here and sell them for top dollar to places like us. So we got those bells there. Okay. You know that new clock and bell tower over there in our new part of the by the school?
Pangle,
over there toward Pangle Hall.
Yeah.
Those bells are even older, and they were cast in 1870, only 5 years after the Civil War was over, and were hanging in a church in Milwaukee, a Catholic church in Milwaukee, from about 1870 to about 1970, almost 100 years. There are 9 of those bells. There's the big tolling bell, and then there's 8 smaller bells.
Westminster bells.
Yeah, and so we got same thing. You know, this company buys those bells and kind of cleans them up and resells them, and they'll come put them in your place. So we got those bells, and I've intended sometime to get somebody to write an article for the Banner or something. You know, because those are interesting. You know, so when if you're over there downtown around there somewhere and you hear the bells tolling on the Lee campus, those are old bells that have been hanging up there, but ringing for a lot of years. But
if I'm downtown, my phone's ringing, I'm trying to watch traffic, I'm mad, I'm trying to get somewhere, I'm trying to get there, you can't hear the bell or the train.
That's right. Well, if you come over to our place,
I mean, you're just...
Sit on a park bench some evening and you can hear the train come through, and you can hear the bells ringing.
Do you think, I sold some property on Mouse Creek Road, and several of the tracks backed up to the interstate. And I thought, well, these will be the last ones sold. They were the first ones sold. So if there was a subdivision that was next to a train track, people would say, oh, that's next to a train track. But I'd say, man, that's next to a train track. So maybe it's what you grow up with that makes you feel comfortable no matter what the reason is.
In the old days, when trains were noisy and loud and dirty and threw off all kinds of crap, then it was not a desirable place to be near the railroad track. But anymore, trains are fast and quiet and clean, and you like hearing that whistle because it has this plaintive, sort of romantic sound to it, sound of somebody going somewhere.
See, I'm similar to that on interstates. Interstates don't bother me at all. It's just a repetition sound that relaxes me.
Yeah, it's like white noise.
White noise,
people pay good money to buy a white noise generator and go in their bedroom to give them a little conscious sound that you get from the interstate.
So a train whistle would be like a comfort thing to you.
Absolutely.
Just like
absolutely.
A
As a matter of fact, if I really wanted to, I've always had trouble sleeping. One thing I might ought to do is get me a recording of a train.
Especially one with rain and
about every 3 or 4 hours, hear
yeah.
that train coming through, and I'll hear that and wake up and say, "Oh yeah, it's fine. I'll be a good boy, Mama." You know.
Yeah. So when did you move off of 11th Street?
Well, I moved off 11th Street over to 8th Street. Didn't move far when I was in 2nd grade. I grew up there, but a preschooler over there on 11th Street. And, you know, it was an interesting thing. I went to Arnold School as a 1st grader. And I lived down there by the railroad tracks where you go up toward Brown Stoneworks. Yeah. I walked from that house to Arnold as a 1st grader.
20 minutes.
Yeah. And the point is, Mayfield was just right over there a few blocks away.
And plus, you didn't even know what school was. You had no concept of why am I even doing this.
No, but my parents were told, they believed in best, you know, we wanted the best education we can get for our kids. Big family. 12 children in my family. 12? 12.
Boy, you get lost in that, wouldn't you?
That's right.
Can you imagine raising 12 now?
No,
I'm raising 2 and I'm a nervous wreck.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I can't even imagine. But I was one of 12, and we were a big house full. But my parents moved to Cleveland as a young couple.
Where are they from?
He's from Georgia, she's from Alabama, and my dad had been a pastor out in Missouri, and that's where they moved here from.
Well, why here?
Because he was a Church of God guy, you know.
And Church of God was?
Well, the Church of God, they offered him a job here.
Oh.
Working at Church of God Publishing House.
Okay.
So he moved here to take that job.
Oh.
So then he raised his family here, had all these children and raised his family here. But they asked, since they weren't native to Cleveland, this would have been in the late 40s, what's the best school? Mm-hmm. Somebody said Arnold School. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't evaluate that.
Yeah.
They just thought, okay, Arnold's the best school. That's where our kids are going. They're going to the best school. They're going to go to Arnold. Well, we're living way over there next to Mayfield, mm-hmm. by the railroad tracks. And for the next few years, my older brothers and sisters and me walked all the way from over there to Arnold because somebody told.
What if it was raining?
Well, then we walked in the rain. We had a raincoat.
Galoshes and...
Yeah. I don't ever remember having an umbrella. That would be for sissies.
Yeah.
You
That's right.
Yeah, but
Why is that?
Well, because
It's still that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
We had kind of a raincoat to come over with a hood to come over your head and galoshes, and when we got there, we took it off, and we might have been a little wet, but I would have never...
I'd rather take my book and go like this and get an umbrella.
Yeah. I would have never thought of having an umbrella.
That's good.
Anyway, I went there. So I went to the 1st grade actually at Arnold. You know who my 1st grade teacher was? Now this shows you what growing up in a small town. It was Sam McReynolds' mother.
God.
Yeah, Miss McReynolds.
Sam McReynolds doesn't wear socks, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, he's got too much money.
Yeah,
to wear socks. Yeah. You know.
I'm still wearing socks.
Yeah, I am too. And we got socks on right. I'm not.
So his mother.
I just tell Sam when you see him. I said, you know, someday I hope I have as much money as
he
he
does.
I'm
voting Republican and wearing and not wearing socks.
His mother was a talented 1st grade teacher.
Was she called Miss McReynolds?
Ms. McReynolds.
If you saw her today, she would be Miss McReynolds.
She would be Miss McReynolds. It never occurred to me that she might have a first name.
Yeah.
Women didn't have a first name. And what you did in those days, the difference in Miss and Mrs., you didn't have, would you know if they're married or not? It's an older woman, you just called her Ms.
Yeah, that was
Ms. McReynolds.
That was the default.
That's right. So to make that distinction between married women and unmarried women, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started school over there.
Was you have older brothers that went?
Yeah, I had just 2 older brothers and an older sister that went there.
So this was not a new concept.
No, and I knew that my older brothers and sisters really liked school, and I remember I was just 5 in those days. My birthday is the week before New Year's, it's Christmas week. So in those days, if you turned 6 by the 1st of January, you went to school. I don't know what the rule is now, but that's what the rule is. So I was just barely 5 and a half, you know. I was halfway through the first grade before I turned 6. But I remember my mother told my sister Sarah, older sister, 2 years older, she was in the 3rd grade, you hold Sarah's hand. And when you cross Parker Street, you've got to have a hold of her hand. And then you can turn loose of her hand till you get to Ocoee Street. When you get to Ocoee Street, you got to be holding her hand again. Those were the rules. I went to the 1st grade for a year, walked into school, and I'd grab Sarah by the hand. We'd run across Parker, hope we didn't get killed, and we'd run across Ocoee and hope we didn't get killed. And anyway, when I got to that 1st grade classroom, I still, you know, I wound up with kids going to Arnold a year or two and with grandkids going to Arnold a few years. I still remember the classroom. I can go in there and show you.
Can you smell it?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
The smell.
It has that smell.
Yeah.
And Ms. McReynolds was my 1st grade teacher, and all I know is I loved her, and I thought she was the greatest thing, and she made me feel great.
A 1st grade teacher has got more responsibility than any grade there is. Think about it.
Huge. You know what? I've loved school ever since. I'm 74 years old.
And you could have hated it ever since, depending on that 1st grade teacher.
Right. There's never been a fall when school started I wasn't there, because I went straight through school and then in grad school and then started teaching college. I mean, every year since I was 5, when fall comes, I'm ready for school to start. I've loved it ever since, and you're absolutely right. I think it all goes back to that 1st grade experience. I went off, I was scared, I was nervous, I'd never really been outside the home much, never been as far away in Cleveland as Arnold School.
She could have said one word and maybe changed the whole trajectory.
That's right, and I would have never, you know, I would have got out of school as soon as I could have. But she was terrific, and I don't remember anything about her except that I thought it was great. I remember the principal of Mayfield, and his name was E.L. Ross.
E.L. Ross.
You know what we call him, High Pockets. And the reason,
you know, I think I knew that.
Yeah, we called him High Pockets. And I don't know, because he'd wear his pants up like this.
They say the older you get, the higher your pants are. So I'm still wearing mine.
I don't know how old he was, but he was just kind of a imposing guy. Of course, when you're 5 years old, the principals want to be imposing.
He's probably 25.
Yeah. But I remember he seemed, you know, we kind of look up there, and man, it looked like his belt was right up around his rib cage. And because of that, we called him High Pockets, because he wore his pants so high. But, you know, now there's an E.L. Ross school, you know, and we'll drive by and I'll tell my grandchildren, I actually knew E.L. Ross.
That's where I went to school, is E.L. Ross.
Is that right? Well,
Mr. Kiker.
Yeah,
Mr. Kiker.
Doug Kiker, yeah. Well, E.L. Ross was the principal. Ms. McReynolds was my 1st grade teacher. And I loved it. And after only 1 year over there, my parents, now my older brother and sister have been going to Mayfield for now 4 years. And they realized, you know, Mayfield, that we've been going to Arnold 4 years. Mayfield's a perfectly good school. They were hearing more and more good things about Mayfield. Why are we sending our kids to walk all the way across town and cross these 2 busy streets? And so we started going to Mayfield. Then I went to Mayfield, you know, throughout the rest of my elementary. And in those days, you went 8 years to elementary school.
To the same school, rather than 6 now.
Yeah. And
there wasn't a junior high.
Yeah, and then you went to high school. 8 years. There were 5 schools in Cleveland. Arnold, that's where the rich kids were. Mayfield, that's where my crowd was. Blythe Avenue, Templeton Hill, and Allen School.
Templeton Hill, where was that? The south?
Yeah, it was right south of Hardwick Woolen Mills, up on the hill a little bit. There's some kind of...
Now, what if you lived way out in the county?
Then you had county schools.
Okay, so you're talking about...
So they still had county school system and a city school system, but we didn't know much about the county system. There were these five schools in the city, and we knew about these 5 schools. We went 8 years, then we went to Bradley High School.
Were you serious about, when you went to Bradley High School, were you serious about school? Or was it just...
You know, yeah, I was. Because I knew that that's where you could make a name for yourself. You know what I mean? And I had a strong attitude of, when you come from the part of town I come from, and when you come from, now, a lot of these people, they don't have any idea what I'm talking about when I say that. These younger people. But when you come from the Church of God, and you come from a big family of 12 children, you just grow up feeling like if you're going to get some respect, you gotta earn it. Otherwise, you're not going to be respected. Come from the wrong end of town, come from the wrong tribe. You know, you're not going to be wearing the coolest clothes that everybody else wears. You know, you're going to work after school instead of hanging around. And, you know, I mean, I grew up with that kind of a poor boy. We weren't poor, but you know what I mean.
So it was actual, what I call a run, trying to do something.
Exactly. I remember when going to Bradley. And I remember Mayfield. It's just a neighborhood school. And, you know, everybody knew everybody, and I don't remember being a lot of drama about doing well or not doing well.
Now, during this time, you're forgetting the trains. You're just
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Isn't that
sure.
weird?
Yeah.
You forget the train.
Yeah, it's just part of the background.
Yeah.
Music. It's only later that
you can't worry about. You can't think about the train.
So you go out to here's who was at Bradley High School when I was there. I graduated in '63.
1963. You're graduating Bradley High School.
That's right.
On Ocoee Street.
That's right. It was there, right there on Ocoee, and there was no Cleveland High School at the time. It was just Bradley. So here's who was at Bradley: the kids from all these 5 city schools, and then the kids from the county, who all rode buses in. So that became part of the sort of the caste system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because all us kids from the city school system, we knew about one another, and you know, like in sports in those days, you had these 5 schools, and that's what you competed with. So you'd have a basketball team. If you were at Mayfield, you'd go play Arnold, Templeton Hill, Allen, and Blythe, and then you'd do it again. You never did have anything to do with the kids in the county. They had their own deal, you know.
So now the baseball player and the baseball player now got to compete for the same team.
Right. That's right. Now you got these city kids and the county kids, okay? And we were getting acquainted for the first time. And the county kids tended generally to come in on buses, and that's one of the things that distinguished us. Now, and the city kids tended to walk, or some of their parents might have dropped them off. You know, my crowd, we never got dropped off. We walked to school, but there was a little bit of that thing, you know, the county students and the city students.
That's just in human nature,
That's
don't
right.
you think?
And
That's never going to go away.
And having to learn to respect one another and get acquainted with one another. And one of the big things that brought us together was sports. Because Bradley was a big high school, and we had great athletic teams. And in those years, you didn't have 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, all these divisions. You just had everybody in one big pot. Everybody in one big pot.
No divisions.
No. So if you're from some little old country high school in some rural area.
Good luck.
Yeah. And then if you're from some big city high school, then you got that. And so it was terrific, but it was tough because, you know, it was everybody in the same pot. I don't know when the TSSAA, Tennessee Secondary School Athletic Association, I don't know when they went to divisions, but
that was a precursor to everybody getting a trophy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So you win the state championship, but it's the state championship for the 2A schools, which means the other schools that only have 350 students, you know. And in my day, it was dog eat dog. It was everybody.
But don't you think that actually allows people to say early on, I can't play basketball.
Yeah.
I'm not going to keep playing basketball. I'm going to do this other thing.
Yeah.
Instead of, for the first 20 years, they're trying to trick you into thinking you can't.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you get out here in the real world,
and you realize it was a different level of
they're
competition.
not going to get me to build just because.
You know, it reminds me a lot of high schools are still that way. We had a girl played point guard for Lady Flames, who came from Polk County High School, and she was fantastic. Many people think best female basketball player we ever had there, and she became an All-American, and you know, she was just great. And I asked our coach, Marty Rowe, one time, how did we get her at Lee? Because she's clearly Division I quality.
Yeah.
And he said, she went to Polk County High School, so nobody gave her a chance. So, you know, he said, I went out there and saw her, and I knew, so she's playing against, now I hate to say this because I don't want anybody competing at that level athletically to get upset by it, but it's sort of like people would say about an athlete coming out of there, well, it's the competition. You know, she's not playing against anybody. She's playing against, well, she's fine for her level.
She's a big frog in a little pond.
That's right. But Marty Rowe, our coach, said, I could tell this girl could play with anybody. So I went after her, you know, I recruited her hard, and she came to Lee because that's the best offer she had, and she turned out to be one of the best in our history. Holly Rowe was her name. But and I think of that sometimes. A couple of times this summer, I drove over Old Benton Pike, drove to Benton just because I was bored. We're in this pandemic. I love that country out through there, and I got a convertible finally for the first time in my life. You know, and I loved in this weather to put the top back and just drive through all these roads around here around Bradley County. And I remember thinking the other day, and I was telling my wife this. I was saying, you know, this girl, she knows, watched her play for 4 years, and she was assistant coach with us for a few years. She came out of this Polk County High School because it's a small high school, playing other small high schools. Nobody thought she could play with the big girls. The fact is, she not only could play with the NCAA Division II, she could have played NCAA Division I if somebody had given her a chance. So she could have played at the SEC level. Yeah. And but what happened in high school in those days, you had none of those divisions, and you're right, that's mirrored now by exactly the same thing at the college level. And so, you'll take a look at it like Lee Sports, and people, well, how good is it really? It's Division II, you know, it's not, they're not competing with Alabama and Tennessee and Mississippi. Well, we don't know, you know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know how, could this individual athlete compete? Maybe, maybe not. That's what I love about track and field, although I don't know anything about it, or cross country, because you put a boy or a girl out there and you set the watch going.
There's a time.
Yeah, you're going to run from point A to point B, go. And it doesn't matter if you're a student at Notre Dame or at University of Alabama, or if you're some little college somewhere, if you can beat that person lining up next to you, then you can demonstrate it. That's the great thing about golf, is the same way. Yeah. Throw a bunch of players out there and say, here's the tee, there's the green, see what you can do, boys.
But now getting into college and being a good athlete, to go to college, you're good this, you're good that, you get something off of your tuition, but they really never go past that. Yeah. I mean, who? Yeah. I mean, you're going to be a professional football player or UFC star, or you know. So, I mean, what really good is it?
Well, for a lot of them, it gets them through college.
All right, so let's say
it helps them pay for college.
All right, and then is that it?
Well, that's it as far as athletics is concerned. But the question is, they got to figure out a way to take their college training and turn it into something else. So let's see. Take this girl Holly I was talking about from Polk County. Yeah. Her goal was not to play in the WNBA, to be a professional basketball player. Her goal was to be a high school teacher and coach. And she went back to Polk County, by the way. That's why I love that story. That's about as good as it gets, I think. Girl goes out, does great, does some other things.
All right, so she saves tuition.
So she's able to go through college, graduate.
Tuition is not really, I mean, it's expensive, but I mean, it's not like you got to sell your soul.
No, but if you love your sport, you know, these kids love their sports. Some kid that grows up playing baseball around here, plays kiddie baseball and little league baseball, and grows up and plays, you know, every winter plays baseball. Then he loves baseball. Then the idea of getting to play 4 more years, and not only getting to play 4 more years, but play when it matters. You know, that is when there's a ump out there and where there's a good competition out there.
And there's some reward, a college degree.
Right. But it matters to play a sport you love. Now, I had my son played soccer, for example. He played soccer at Cleveland High School. He loved soccer. I tried to get him more interested in other things, other sports. Somehow he got started playing soccer as a little kid at one of these youth programs around here. He loved it from the beginning. He still loves it. Okay, so he plays high school soccer. He was captain of his soccer team at Cleveland High. He was leading scorer out there his senior year. He was a good, solid soccer player, but they weren't a great team, you know. So he goes to college and he plays soccer at Lee for 3 years, and then he kind of realized he's got to get focused on other things. So a kid like that, just being able to continue to play a sport, you know, when it matters. Baseball player gets to play a sport. Well, that's what college sports is good for most kids. If you love it, it's worth it. If you don't love it, it's just a job.
Well, I ride bicycles and I'm about as good at bicycling as probably you are as a basketball player. I mean, if here's good, I'm like here.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So there's something about thinking I'm going to ride this afternoon.
Right.
I ride with my good friend Alvin Calhoun, and we ride together. And he'll text me, but I start speeding up what I'm trying to get done that day, so I can be ready to go at 5:30. Right. So there may be a bigger benefit to these sports than I'm giving credit to it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was never an athlete. I love sports. I love to follow sports. I love to play sports, but I was never any good at any of it. But I really do think athletics is a very, very positive thing in the lives of most kids. I think it keeps them motivated. It keeps them working hard. A lot of kids that's what I worry about in this pandemic.
Oh,
you just close these sports down. Now I'm glad high school they're able to play football this season and some of the other sports, but now at the college level, all levels. They've just closed it all down with the possibility of football still being played. Now, who knows? We don't know if SEC.
And why even discern?
Yeah.
Either it's a good idea or it's a bad idea.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, so if
you're a soccer player and you've been playing soccer all your life, and your soccer season ended last year, second week in November, and you got to wait from second week in November all the way back around to third week of August. You got to stay in shape. You got to go to class and stay eligible. You're just waiting for that 3-month soccer season. You live for that 3-month soccer season. And you get a phone call, like all of our soccer players, men's and women's. You get a phone call about the second week of August saying, sorry boys, but the NCAA has ruled no soccer this fall. Well, that's a crushing blow. It really is. And what I worry about is these students staying motivated, staying in the game. If their life is sort of built around their sport and they're told you can't compete, now they can hang on for the spring, we hope.
If I get on that COVID thing, I get so, it's just,
well,
I mean, we need to be careful. I guess.
Yeah.
I guess is all I can say. But I can't imagine. If you don't have it, you don't have it.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't have it, I don't have it.
Yeah.
It's like saying, are you right-handed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and we'll see. We're opened at Lee.
Was that scary? I mean, what do you do? I mean,
well, it is scary because we've been committed to being in person all the way, but we know that our kids are going to have to stay healthy for us to stay open, And there's a lot of colleges and universities out there. A lot of them didn't even try.
What'd they do? Just say we're not going to open?
Yeah, or we're going to do it online. But it's hard to say to this kid, we're going to send you your lessons online. We're going to teach you online.
That's just,
and we're still going to charge you $30,000 a year, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it
so
needs to be 5.
yeah,
But and you're not really going to learn anything.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's like working from home.
It's not the same.
Now I don't want to make people that work from home mad at me, but I'll say this: something about coming in the office reminds me I'm at work at the very least, you know, and so I'm not sure that I'll say this: it takes a really disciplined person to not be working with other people and still work as much.
And he will stop eventually.
Yeah.
You just can't tell me a person's going to work at home and do the same as they're going to be going to work. It's not possible.
Well, and I think the same thing is true of students taking courses through Zoom, as most students are doing it. Most colleges are doing it with Zoom.
Yeah.
So, okay, we had to stop in the middle of March. We had to tell all of our students, okay, turn on your computer and your professor's going to be there lecturing to you on Zoom. And we got through the semester that way.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and I think
it worked.
I think it worked. But now to open up this semester and try to do it that way, I just don't think it would work. And so we're trying to be open. Now, honestly, I don't know what things will look like by the time this gets out there where the public can see it. Things could have changed a lot at Lee, but we've only been, we only opened this last week, but things look good so far. But it's up to, our students are wearing masks. We've taken every one of our classrooms and reorganized the classrooms so that they're 6 feet apart. Yeah. But we know that when classes are over, and these kids are going to all pile in the car and go to somebody's apartment and have a good time. And that's happening in colleges and universities all across the country.
And you're not going to stop that.
That's right.
You're not going to stop it. But now let me ask you this. You get out of Bradley High School. Then where do you go?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I had a lot of options coming out of Bradley because I'd worked hard and had done a good, I was a good student. I went to Lee. Now, in those days, 1963, Lee honestly wasn't much.
What was it called then, Lee?
Lee College.
It wasn't Bob Jones.
No. It was Bob Jones was gone a long time ago. Bob Jones left here
because they named the road.
Yeah.
Bob Jones.
No, Bob Jones.
No. What's that guy's
Billy
name?
Graham.
They named that road Billy Graham because Billy Graham had gone there for how long?
For one semester.
For one semester.
Yeah, and he lived in that dorm that's right at the end of that road
Yeah.
at 15th Street. They named that piece of 15th Street Billy Graham Avenue. And
so they named a road after him.
Yeah, so but when he came to Lee, it wasn't Lee, it was Bob Jones. Bob Jones is an interesting story. I don't think anybody remembers him much anymore because he left here in the 40s. So who's still around to remember?
Who was Bob Jones?
Bob Jones was kind of a big-time traveling evangelist. He was a Methodist that acted like a Baptist. So he went around to all these small towns all over the South and had these revival services. And
tent revivals, that sort of thing?
Yeah. He was that kind of evangelist. He was big-time evangelist. People come forward and get saved. Yeah. Okay. And he had a big following, and he was a kind of a celebrity level evangelist of that day. Well, he decided in the 1930s, to start a college, as most of these guys do.
Yeah.
Falwell started one.
Yeah.
Pat Robertson started one.
Yeah.
And, Oral Roberts.
I may start one.
Oral Roberts started one. Jimmy Swaggart, you remember that name?
Yeah.
He started one. Yeah. Okay. Bob Jones decided to start a college. Okay. He looked around the South for some place where he could buy him a campus cheap. Okay. He came through Cleveland, Tennessee, and this little piece of a campus was sitting there empty because it had been started by the Methodist. He was a Methodist, remember? Mm-hmm. They called it Centenary College. At that time, it was on the outskirts of Cleveland.
in what year? 1930?
Well, that's when he bought it. Centenary College actually was started. The reason it's called Centenary, now see, this sounds like I'm doing Cleveland history. The reason it was called Centenary College is it was started in the centennial year of the Methodist Church.
Not Centenary Avenue.
And Centenary Avenue was named after the college.
God.
So you ever wondered why Centenary Avenue is this long block that doesn't fit in with anything?
Yeah.
You know, it starts right up there on Ocoee Street.
Because the 100-year anniversary of the Methodist Church,
Broad Street Methodist.
Broad Street Methodist started a college.
That's right. And you know who the pastor of Broad Street Methodist was? We're getting these names all. George R. Stewart. So he was the pastor of the Broad Street Methodist Church.
You can't make this up.
No, you can't make this up. And people think Cleveland's boring.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Methodists, they want to celebrate their 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
So they said, start a college. Now, remember the Methodists.
What year?
1885.
1885.
1885.
Right after.
That's right. That's right.
Rott's time. He's just about over.
Now remember the Methodists, they have conferences. Mm-hmm. So the Broad Street Methodist Church, all the Methodist churches here in Bradley County are in what's called the Holston Conference. And it was pointed out, and normally the conferences have colleges, right? Mm-hmm. Pointed out, the Holston Conference already got a college. Yeah, but you know what it was? Emory and Henry, all the way up in Bristol. So the Holston Conference is this big, long conference that stops at Hamilton County line and runs all the way up into Virginia. So Pastor George R. Stewart from Broad Street said, we want us a college down on this end of the Holston Conference, so we'll start it. So they started a little college, and they called it Centenary College after the centennial. And they put it right out there where Lee is now, and then they built this big old long street, started to build these, kind of try to attract people to build nice homes there, which they succeeded.
What was that road called?
There wasn't a road when they built it. They just built it out there. So the chapel, you know where the Lee University chapel is, that little stone chapel right there on Ocoee Street. That was where the pastor of Broad Street always lived. And so that was about as far out of town. When you came that far north out of town, you had downtown where it is now. Mm-hmm. You came north out of town where Broad Street and Ocoee Street come together. That's where the monument is, of course. When they came together and ran on up to what is now Ocoee Street, North Ocoee Street, that was U.S. Highway 11, and you were out of town by then. So what they did is they went out of town, and built this college. 1885. It operated for about 30 years. It was a women's college. They did not allow men.
What'd they teach?
They taught French and piano and sewing and cooking. It was called a women's finishing. That was the name of the school in those days.
Like the book on the head,
maybe. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Manners.
They don't do that on
Yeah, no. Yeah. You know what they were finishing the women for?
What?
For men. They were. So,
they quit doing that.
That's right. But in those days, it's like the men would go off to college and they'd learn how to make a living.
I see.
And the women of a certain. I
remember on the House on the Little Prairie, they sent that girl off to finish.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
College.
All right. One of those finishing schools.
And that was about the same era.
That's right. And what they did is they learned how to be gracious ladies and run a
good posture.
Run a home, yeah. Good posture, good grammar.
So Bob Jones buys this car.
So this thing goes 30 years and goes belly up because by 1915, 16, 17, there's no market for that women finishing college anymore, and so the Methodists just gave it up, and they had about 4 or 5 buildings sitting there, maybe less than that, maybe 3 or 4 buildings, right there where our main building is now, where we got a fountain. We just put a new fountain in there. That was Centenary College. Bob Jones, he's rolling around looking for a place to start him a school that'll train preachers, because his vision was to take all these boys that's called to preach and send them out there and make preachers out of them. He bought that from the Methodist. Now, it's not clear how much he paid the Methodist for it. because the Methodists always complained that he cheated them, but the Church of God came along 20 years later and bought it from him, and so we couldn't complain.
So he only did it for 20 years.
He only did it from a little less than about 15 years.
So in that time, Billy Graham comes for one semester.
That's right. During that time, Billy Graham, there's that dorm, that big long dorm that's on Ocoee Street, right there, that kind of runs back. The only thing Lee has on that side of Ocoee Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was an old dorm that was there going all the way to Bob Jones, and that's where Billy Graham lived. That's one reason they want to name that piece of 15th Street after Billy Graham, because he lived there. He lived there. He walked downtown and worked in a shoe store, Appler's, department store selling shoes, and he didn't like it.
I read his biography, and it talks about being said he left because they were too strict.
That's right. Yeah. He had a falling out with Bob Jones because he was so strict. And he wanted to get people saved. He wanted to preach the gospel, but he didn't want to keep people buttoned up so tight that they
in Billy Graham's book, I read it towards the end. It said that if he had it to do all over again, he would preach more on grace.
Yeah.
So he had sort of taken a little bit of a change. I think maybe that we all are.
You know what? You have put your finger on a very important principle that I've made this point before. I've never heard anybody else make it. Because I love to tell the story of Billy Graham coming to Bob Jones and hating it. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, Bob Jones' office was in the president's office there at Lee. That's where Bob Jones had his office. And Billy Graham tells the story of he was here one semester, from Labor Day to Christmas, and he was unhappy. He wanted to go someplace else. He went back home to North Carolina where he was a farmer's family, and told his mother, I want to leave. And she said, why? And he said, it's just too strict. And she said, okay, but you got to go tell Brother Jones. It was personal in those days.
Yeah.
You went over there, he was going to make a preacher out of you, and now you're going to leave. You got to go tell him you're leaving. If you'll go tell him you're leaving, walk in there like a man and you're leaving.
They wouldn't do that
you'll
today,
You'll have my blessing. Oh, heavens no. So that's what he did. I was in my office that this happened. I love this story because Billy Graham walks into the president's office and says, I'm leaving. I'm going to go down to Florida at another college. And Bob Jones says to him, I'll tell you this, if you leave here, it'll show me you're a quitter. If you quit this, you'll quit the next thing. You'll never amount to anything in the kingdom of God. Isn't that a great story?
That's a great story.
So I tell that story to tell students, sometimes the president doesn't know what he's talking about. You know what I mean? So go prove me wrong,
That reminds me of the poem If by Kipling.
Rudyard Kipling.
It says, if you can, I forget exactly, but if you can ignore what they say, but at the same time consider it.
Right.
In other words, ignore your prosecutors, but consider the fact that they could be right.
Yeah. So, I memorized that poem. I can't say it all now. Talking about Bradley, and talking about your teachers, or somebody else's mother.
Yeah.
My teacher out at Bradley that really made a huge impact on me was Rodney Fitzgerald's mother, Lily Frank Fitzgerald. She made us memorize that.
The story If.
Yeah.
I used to, you get these alarm clocks that come on with music.
Yeah.
I have the CD that come. For a long time I had it come on to the poem If.
Yeah. That's a great poem.
Yeah.
It's tough stuff.
It's tough. It's so true. I mean, nothing's changed.
It's a poem that braces you up against the wall and says, "Okay, come on, boy."
I mean, if you read that poem, it's as good as any. Music that can pump you up as anything.
Well, anyway, Bob Jones only stayed there about 15 years. He didn't like it. He didn't like Cleveland much, and so he sold his campus to the Church of God. 1947, and in 47 they bought it and they started a college there, and they called it Lee College. Now, people think we were named for Robert E. Lee. I get asked that all the time. And one reason is because we're in a small southern town, and people just think, well, Lee, maybe it was named for Lee. And the other reason is we're on Lee Highway, which was named for Robert.
Which not,
Lee.
yeah. It used to be called Robert E. Lee Highway,
That's right.
doesn't it?
That's
Some
right.
of the old deeds will
Yeah.
say Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, and that's still the name of it.
Yeah, still, yeah.
People would like to forget that.
Yeah, it's,
So people will frequently ask me.
Yeah.
When I say, I don't mean in the old days. I had a potential donor here in town this summer who didn't know much about Lee.
2020.
2020, summer of 2020, and he was thinking about giving some money to Lee because of a long story that I won't tell you, but he's not from here in town, didn't know anything about Lee, came to see me to learn more about Lee. And it turned out he did give us a nice piece of money. But between the time we first met and the time he gave us the money, he said, you know what slowed me down, Paul? I said, no, what? He said, I ran into somebody that told me that Lee was named for Robert E. Lee. And he said, that really kind of bummed me out. I didn't really know if I didn't want to be associated with a school named for Robert E. Lee. I said, Bill, please,
I can't get there.
Yeah.
I can't get.
Well, I mean, the correct answer to that is what difference would it make?
Yeah, what
at this
difference?
point?
Yeah.
Are we a good school or
Yeah,
not?
yeah,
Is this a good place?
yeah.
You know who we were named for? Flavius Josephus Lee. Now, there's a name for you.
They must have been Italian.
I don't know. but
Josephus.
You know what? He was from Cleveland, and he was the minister of music at the First Baptist Church.
A nobody.
Yeah.
Maybe, right?
Yeah. F.J. Lee, we call him, but his
Yeah.
name was Flavius Josephus Lee. But what he was a leading minister in our church, and so they named a college for him. So.
Well, where did you go to college?
I went to Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I took a lot of grief for it because we're talking about the '60s. Lee wasn't.
Yeah, I mean you'd gone in a triangle from Arnold to Mayfield
to Bradley.
to Bradley to Lee.
I know, and I sometimes still will tell students, I never did get very far from home. Because I can stand
like
there.
Steve Martin in the movie The Jerk. He said, "I'm going to end up at the end of the driveway."
Hey, I can stand over there where I work right now and hear that same train whistle that I was listening to as a little boy laying in bed.
What was your major?
My major was religion in undergraduate and then psychology. Then I went to Emory University. So, I went to Lee, and in those days you went to Lee on your way somewhere else, on your way somewhere
Because
else.
it was at 4 year?
It was 4
That's
years.
right, it was 4. You're the one that made it 4 years.
Yeah.
So it was just a Cleveland State type 2
It was
years.
a 2-year school. It had a 2-year junior college and a 4-year Bible college and a high school. There was a high school there. We folded down the high school. We didn't need to be in high school business. And then brought it all into one college.
So when you went there to be a 2 years to be a what?
Well, then I went. I thought at the time I was going to be a minister or an English teacher. I majored in English actually, but then I went on to Emory, and I got interested in psychology, and that's another one of those things, kind of like Ms. McReynolds changed my life. First grade teacher. I took one psychology course when I was at Lee. And this guy made it so interesting that I remember thinking, man, I don't want to study English. This is what I want to study. And I went ahead and did a graduate in psychology, and did graduate work in psychology, went on to Atlanta, and went to Emory and did a master's degree and a PhD in psychology.
Then what?
Then I came back to Lee to teach.
Not to go get your own practice of being a psychologist.
I was never that kind of psychologist. There's different kinds of psychologists, and it's like I say to students, there's one kind of psychologist that can help people, and I'm not one of those.
So what's the other?
It's experimental psychology, it's theoretical psychology. It's developmental psych. That is, it's the logic and reasoning of how behavior develops, but not actually dealing with people to solve their problems.
But
That's called a clinical psychologist.
So what's the point of studying it if you're not helping them? So in other words, theoretically, you would study it, figure it out,
So somebody else could
so
use that.
somebody else
demo.
could use it.
That's the
I
way it's
see,
supposed to
yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, I went to graduate school at Emory in psychology to be a clinical psychologist. So I'd have a practice and I'd help people.
Yeah.
I went the first year, and then I got a job at a counseling center in Atlanta for just a summer job to work there, as part of my training. Hated it.
Why is that?
Because I just didn't think I had the ability to help people. And I remember, and the guy there who was a psychiatrist, who was the medical director of this counseling center where I was working, I talked with him about it. And he said, do you enjoy this, Paul? And I said, no, actually, I hate it. And he said, I said, I'll tell you how bad I hate it. I was living there in Atlanta. Sometimes driving in the morning, I'll get in this traffic and I'll almost have like a fender bender, and I'll think, well, at least I wouldn't have to go to work today. And I hate something pretty bad.
That's hate.
Almost,
Yeah.
you almost just rather have an automobile accident.
Yeah.
And so this guy said to me, he's a smart guy. He said, Paul, it's ridiculous. You're going to spend the next 4 years of your life getting a doctorate in something that you don't like? It's crazy.
How old were you then?
I was about 20, 23. I'd gone straight through college and was in grad school.
I don't think people are really totally there till they're about 25.
Yeah, no, you look back and you wonder, how do you even know?
Yeah, how did you?
Yeah. Anyway, he said, what don't you, he said this interesting thing, because I was doing counseling sessions with young people there that summer as part of the internship. He said, you're really good at it. But if you don't like it, then you should not continue. And he said, what don't you like? What is it you don't like? And I said, I don't like the fact that these people come in here, they're paying their money, they're sitting down with me, they're expecting me to help them solve their problems, and I don't feel like I have a clue how to solve a problem. I feel like a fraud. I feel like I'm taking their money and they're expecting something from me I can't possibly deliver. And it's a burden. And he said, well, that's the way it's going to be, because the expectations are always going to be way ahead of the ability of a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist to deliver. So if you feel yourself kind of burdened by that, gap between what you feel like you can do for them and what they expect you to do for them, then you need to get out of it now. And, at Emory, there were 3 divisions of psychology, the PhD program. You had the clinical psych, which is where you learn how to do counseling, and then there was experimental psych, where you did experiments with animals. Everybody's heard of Pavlov's dogs and the rats in the maze. Yeah. And then there's developmental psych.
Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, that's right. So
I guess,
so you got then there's human research, developmental psych, how individual human beings develop.
Yeah.
So I switched from clinical to developmental.
Because if you had studied it and determined this is why people do that, now now I'm not a fraud.
Yeah, and I'm never promising anybody anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it.
Statistics.
Yeah, and I'll hand it off to somebody else, and maybe he can help you, maybe he can't, but not on me. So, I don't like to sit down with, somebody thinking I can help them get some insight into their problems.
Like a marriage counselor. Can you imagine how they could really mess people up?
Well, here's the thing. Now, think about marriage counselors. These OPs. What pressure. How are you supposed to help somebody else fix their marriage?
And they're lying to him.
Yeah.
They're not even telling him exactly the thing, right?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It wasn't for me. I'll say this.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me. So I switched, and then I loved it. I love psychology. And here I am, 50 years later, still teaching this stuff because I love it.
Teaching psychology.
Yeah.
Research.
Yeah. And theory.
Yeah, theory. Yeah.
But I'm not trying to help anybody.
Yeah.
So, wish I was this kind of person that just loved to help you with your problems, tell me about your problems. I'll help you with your problems.
You take too much responsibility
I
for
don't
what
want-
you do
yeah.
to guest for people.
And see, that's one of the things I like about building. I'm not a builder, but we built a lot of stuff, you know.
Your stuff y'all build is absolutely perfect.
Thank you. Well, we take great pleasure and great pride in it. One of the things, you can sit down here and you can get a piece of property, and you can take a set of plans, and then, of course, my job as president is go out and raise the money and get all that and figure it all out. But then you can see that thing take shape, and when it's done, now you must take this kind of pleasure from building. When it's done, you can cut the ribbon and hand the key to somebody and walk away and
You
know.
open the door, and the door's all
That's
that.
right, and you just know, I did that. Well, try doing that as a marriage counselor.
Oh,
You know, because you might you might think you got somebody's marriage fixed, and the guy might.
it might be the aunt that fixed it.
Yeah. So anyway, the thing is, I love psychology, and I'm going to be. You know, we have this thing at Lee called Encore. These evening classes for older people, 60 and older.
Yeah, I've heard it, yeah.
I've never taught one of those.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach one of those this year.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach a course on like the 5 biggest ideas in psychology. I'm just going to take one night, you know, not a lot of heavy lifting, one night for like an hour and 20 minutes, and talk about here's one of the biggest ideas in psychology. And so, you know, the reason I'm going to do that is because I love it. I love it. And I've taught every year since I came to Lee as a teacher. I was a teacher for 15 years, and I became president.
At what year did you come to work there?
71.
And
71, 72, that year, and I've been teaching ever since. And all the years I've been president, I've still taught one course a year.
When you say one course, is that 1 hour a day, or how's
That
that
would
go?
be 3 hours a week
So
for 15 weeks. So that's not a lot, but I keep doing it because I enjoy it. I love taking a group of students and sitting there and saying, okay, let's talk about this idea. And so now Encore, this is not going to be college kids. This is going to be people my age, you know.
they might argue.
I'm sure they will. You know, I'm sure they will. You know, one of the problems is they've had a little life experience.
Yeah, that's
it's
right,
harder to fool.
Yeah.
You know, so you can take a bunch of 19-year-olds and say, now here's how it's going. You know, here's how life is going to lay
They
out.
think you actually know.
Yeah, that's right. You take a bunch of 65-year-olds and they raise their hand and say, Dr. Conn, in all due respect, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, my mother, when I came as a young teacher at Lee, I was probably about 30 years old, and my mother decided she wanted to take a psychology class, and she came and took a couple of psychology classes from me.
In the class that you were in?
Yeah.
That had to have been odd.
That was pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because one of them was
You had to grade her papers?
Graded her papers. Theories of development was one of them, and that's telling what all the great psychologists think how children develop and how parenting works out and all that. Now, my mother's sitting out there and she, you know, you can't teach psychology without talking about sex every now and then. Yeah, so it's in there somewhere. I try to avoid it, but generally. So here's my dilemma. I'm teaching this psychology class. I'm getting to this stuff. There sits my mother back there on the back row. So all I knew to do was just plow on through it and
not look directly at her.
Yeah, that's right. No eye contact.
So you actually graded your mother's paper?
I actually did. Now, you know how that's going to turn out. You know how that's going to turn out. I'd like to think I was enough of a man that I could give my mother anything but an A.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, that was quite an experience because she wanted, you know, and it's interesting, isn't it? Here's her boy that doesn't know Jack.
Yeah.
And she knows more, you know.
She raised you, and you're telling her how she's supposed to raise you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Now, did you apply for how do you get the job as college
president?
Yeah. I mean,
well, you know.
I mean, for the layman, the guy that knows nothing, people that know nothing. What does it mean, a Dr. Conn? Does that mean you got a doctrine?
That means I got a doctorate. That means I got a degree. It's like a college degree. It's a more advanced degree. After you get your college degree, a bachelor's degree in 4 years, and you get master's degree, and then a PhD.
So it's bachelor's,
master's, PhD.
PhD,
And that's the traditional, and then there's postdoctoral work that you do.
and then.
Well, then become president. You know, you can pick anybody to be president. You want to be
But I
president?
mean doctorate, no.
Yeah. Oh,
But the doctorate, postdoctoral is before doctorate.
No, postdoctoral is after you've got your PhD. In my case, I got my PhD so stinking early, you know. But then if you want to still go back and keep learning stuff.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a place for people that have already got their PhD.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no further degree for them
Yeah.
to earn. So they just have these postdoctoral. You do postdoctoral studies. So I've done that at Harvard for 3 years. And I've gone back a year at a time and just to keep learning.
In psychology?
In psychology, yeah. Because there's always something new to learn.
Well, sure. Yeah. And other new theories.
Yeah, that's right. And as a matter of fact, the first time I went to Harvard, I went up there for a year because there was a particular theorist, a guy named Lawrence Kohlberg, he was kind of all the thing, you know, in psychology. But when I was in my PhD program at Emory University, he still hadn't been discovered, you know, so I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah.
And my students at Lee started asking me about him. Now he's starting to pop up in all the textbooks. You get a psychology textbook, this guy's all in it. They would ask me more about Kohlberg. Anyway, he was at Harvard. So, you know, I took a year off after I'd been teaching at least 7 years. Went up there and spent a year with him, studying with him, learned more what he was all about. So what happens is, you know, the new people keep coming and discovering new things and doing new research and having new ideas, even if it turns out later they weren't right.
If you notice that here's the theory, and then they change it, and then they have a new theory, and then it goes back to...
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
Nothing new under
so
the sun.
So it's the study of it.
Yeah. Psychology is just the study of behavior.
Yeah.
And people have studied behavior a lot of different ways over a long period of time. And you can sometimes go back to something somebody wrote 100 years ago, and it's better than what they wrote last year, you know, because you're studying the same thing, human behavior, but there are different ways of looking at it. It's kind of a perpetual motion machine.
And it's one of those things that studying human behavior is, you know, if I'm from Georgia and you're from Tennessee, we're a little bit different. Yeah. But you take somebody from Germany and here, we're a little more different. And so it'd be a hard thing to figure out why somebody's thinking this way or that way.
Right. It is. And psychology doesn't know much. You know, we don't know, we meaning psychologists, don't know very much. It's young. Psychology is only 150 years old, and people never even started trying to study human behavior in a systematic way until 150 years ago. Now, people are trying to figure each other out as long as there's been people, you know.
But
no systematic kind of textbook theoretical approach. Experimentation going on, that sort of thing.
So you're already a professor there, and then you get a chance to become president?
Yeah, I'd been a professor 15 years, and Lee wasn't doing well.
1986.
86, I became president.
Before that, you were a professor.
That's right. And I taught, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed living here in Cleveland, and I had kids, and they grew up here in Cleveland, but Lee started to do poorly financially and as far as enrollment, and nothing had been done much on campus for, I think they had done one building in 20 years. And so they kind of rolled the dice, you know. I was this young guy, I was just turned 40-year-old guy. I had no experience in being a president, of course.
And Trump would say, "What have you got to lose?"
What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
That was kind of the attitude. So they had had 3 different presidents in the last 5 years, you know, and somebody decided to take a chance on me. Asked me, and I wanted to take a shot at it. And you know, the faculty's always got a lot of ideas of how the administration
Oh, I'm
getting it
sure.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. My electricians can tell you how
Of
I need
course,
to be a contractor.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And they weren't in on that other conversation.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not meaning the electricians, but
yeah,
plumbers
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It's you just and I forget that when I'm dealing with some people. I say, now wait a minute.
Yeah.
I wasn't in on that initial conversation. I better just keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
But that's usually too late.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what I was doing, but anyway, it's like you say. Take a shot at it.
Was it nerve wracking? I mean, when was you thinking, can I do this?
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. As a matter of fact, they have an inauguration for new presidents, and we get all in our caps and gowns, and we all march in there, and all the city fathers came, and they played that back this last year when I announced I was leaving. They had a thing and played my inauguration speech, a video of my inauguration speech. And, I talked in there about two things. One, how scared I was that I didn't know what I was doing. And two, how I wanted to bring the city of Cleveland and Lee closer together because people at Lee were over there, nobody paid much attention to them. And people at Lee didn't pay much attention to the community. And when young people grew up in this community, they didn't really even consider Lee much. They thought that was some kind of Church of God thing over there that didn't have much to do with the rest of us. Yeah. And
that was the mindset.
It was the mindset.
It was. That's not.
And
you're not making that up. That's the way it was.
It definitely was, and I had grown up with that. And I talked about that in my inauguration speech, and I said, the one thing I'm going to try to do is change that, because I grew up in this town. I'm a son of Cleveland. But I'm also grew up around Lee, and I'm a son of Lee, so I'm going to try to bring these things together. And I think that that's been one of the accomplishments of my presidency. Is Cleveland respects Lee, Lee respects Cleveland. People at Lee, we've got a lot of different people at Lee, and they have a lot of different ideas about things. But there's a lot of mutual respect.
Since '86, I graduated from high school in '84. So, for all my cognitive years about everything besides school, it's always been Paul Conn.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not realize it, but my group sees you as a legend. I mean, not even a legend, but there's no higher name.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you.
I mean, we've had mayors, Tom Rowland.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Alan Jones, and he's done a lot for Cleveland.
Yeah.
But Paul Conn is right there.
Well, that's awfully kind of you. I've always enjoyed being a part of this community.
I've got a friend of mine that you don't know that has a relative that works there at Lee, and that this person said they would take a bullet for you.
Yeah.
Now I know that probably is extreme, but this person was serious.
Yeah.
Now how do you accomplish that? I mean, this is not a guy that you spend time with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've
I mean, from keeping the plants watered.
Yeah.
To keeping the school going, to this guy saying, "I'll take a bullet for this man," that you may not even really know him.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful thing about working there. We have we feel like we're on a mission. The Blues Brothers, we're on a mission from God.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of feel that way at Lee. We really care about Lee, and we work hard, and I think they've seen that I've worked hard, so I think we have created a team spirit there.
It's just a spirit, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
I'll build some buildings, and it'll go great. And I'll build some buildings, they won't go great. Yeah. I build some buildings, everybody enjoyed it. Yeah. Some buildings, it was a hard job. It's just a spirit that's created, that something creates it, and you can't stop it.
Yeah, that's true.
No matter what it is, and it takes something different to change it. So,
right.
But Lee College has been, it's an absolute beautiful campus.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, we're trying to keep it that way, and we're trying to set a standard or preserve a standard, there. And we want You know, I was mentioning Mayfield School, how I grew up going to Mayfield, and Mayfield looks terrible from the outside. You know, the city school system sold that property and built the new Mayfield School over there on 20th Street. But so we went to an auction and we sat out there and we paid our money. You know,
I was at that auction. I didn't bid, but I just went.
Yeah, well, that was kind of an interesting day, wasn't it?
It was. I remember people walking in and out a lot. And
that was a nerve-wracking.
How long ago has that been?
15 years. Was it 15 years?
It was about the time the economy went down.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Everybody thought they were going to get a good deal, and I guess y'all did too, right?
Yeah. Well, we tried to figure out a way to make a preemptive bid on it, you know, where we didn't have to go to auction because we were afraid somebody would jump in there and bid the price up, which is kind of what happened. But that was a weird day.
I mean, who else could even need that?
I know, but see, here's the problem. It's not somebody that really needs it or wants it. It's somebody we're willing to pay for it and sit there for 2 or 3 years to sell it back to us higher. You know how that one works.
That's bad karma.
Yeah. So, but we had and I kind of hated that we were going to have to stand out there. I mean, to me, that was the school. I grew up walking up and down those halls going to that school. And then we built Lee out there to where, and I felt like, by golly, this is our neighborhood. They ought to give us a little edge here, you know, instead of somebody just coming in from someplace else, we have to bid against them. I had a little of that feeling.
Yeah. But I think that's what makes Lee College good is the personal feeling. You can't separate that.
So I fussed about it. I'll tell you who got my mind right. You remember the Conn Luke, you know, got to get your mind right?
Yeah.
My brother Ray.
That was a good movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie, one of my favorites. Yeah. The other great line in the movie is when the old sheriff got him down in the hole and says, "What we have here is a failure to communicate."
Yeah. He said, failure.
Yeah, to communicate. Yeah. Well, anyway, he also talks about you got to get your mind right, boy. You got to get your mind right.
People still use that saying, "Conn Luke."
That's right. Yeah, young, good-looking Paul Newman. You know, before he got old. Yeah. But anyway, I tell you who helped me get my mind right, and that was my brother Ray. Now you know Ray.
I know Ray.
And Ray builds, you know, Tricon.
He
builds around here. He grew up in Cleveland. You know, we were closest brothers growing up all these years. I've been telling you about. He was right in there with me. Yeah. But a couple of days before that auction, and I was kind of sour attitude. You know, I was kind of grumbling around there. You know, I'm not going to. I was wishing we could have got a deal, you know, a little cheaper. I didn't really want to go out there and bid with whoever might walk up on the lot. Raymond, I remember Raymond and I.
You call him Raymond?
Yeah, Raymond. We called him Raymond growing up.
Because I call him Ray.
Everybody calls him Ray. Yeah, that's right.
But you call him Raymond?
Yeah. So we were getting ready to plan the science building at Lee. You know, now that helped put you where it was because we built that science building in 2009, 2010, and this is when we were planning to build a science building. So we were going around looking at some other colleges that had built new science buildings. So it might have been about 2008. So there was some college up in Kentucky that just built a big new science building, and I met Raymond up there. That's what I remember about it. I remember that. And it was like the day before we were supposed to have that auction, and I was kind of grumbling around with him. She should have given us that school, or give it to us cheaper, make a sweetheart deal or something. You know, we'll have to go in there and stand there with it alone. And Raymond got me straight, as he does frequently. You know, he's got a lot of sense. He said, "Paul, don't be ridiculous. All those reasons why you're saying that you felt like you should have got a kind of an inside line on this thing, that's just all the reasons why you got to have it. So you just got to kind of hitch up your pants and go up there and stand up there with everybody else and outbid who, you know, you need to, whatever you got to pay, they just pay and quit fussing about it. And then, you know Lee needs that.
Now, he might have been the only person that could tell you that living, right?
That's right. And I remember coming back home, driving from Kentucky, where we had met to go through this, and we'd had lunch or something. He's right, I need to just go down there and get my checkbook out. That's what we did, because I was fussing, and I remember, now this is the kind of stuff that nobody knows, and I should have forgotten a long time ago. I remember I had set a price of $500,000. I thought, this old sorry school falling apart. If it was any good, city school board would have kept it.
Yeah.
They know.
And who else is going to want it?
That's right. And what the heck
maybe
are they going to do? What are they going to do with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody going to move in here and make a sock factory in here or something, make mini warehouses?
Bring it up to code.
Yeah.
Let them deal with the city.
Yeah, that's right. So I'd set in my head $500,000, and I told Ray, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to bid up to $500,000, and if somebody bids $501,000, they can have it. That's when Ray got me straight. He said, "You're crazy. You're going to go suck it up and put a smile on and bid whatever you have to bid to get it."
What was the final bid?
$850. We went to $850. So
now this is from a college that in '86 was.
Yeah, that's right. So I stood out there on the sidewalk where I went to school as a little boy, and we bid. I could tell you a couple of people that bid against us, but I won't get into all that. But
I was there. I just can't remember.
Yeah. Well, when they turned the cameras
off.
Yeah,
what we're talking about. Yeah.
But we went to $850. We bought it for $850. It's the best $850 we ever spent.
Bet.
Yeah, it was worth every penny of it.
And y'all got it looking pretty good.
Yeah,
I know you haven't done much, but you mowed the yard.
We've done a lot inside. Now we're ready to do the outside.
Now,
And so that you can keep watching. As a matter of fact, I've got a well-known local, not local, but Chattanooga, business person that's given me a real nice big gift for the exterior. So that thing needs a new roof. It needs new windows. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. Back in the 70s or whenever, when they put these old plastic windows in schools.
It's almost like they didn't think about the windows.
Yeah, and so theirs are still in there. We need to tear out, that old parking lot. We just need to spend several $100,000 and fix up the exterior, and we're going to do that, Lord willing, in the next 6 months to a year. I really hoped we could get it done by Christmas, but it's. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get it done by Christmas, but we're going to. People that watch that, come on by there sometime in early 2021, and I think you'll see we're going to make that thing look a lot better. But so I don't know what got us off on that, but. Yeah,
when you talk about we, you're no longer the president.
That's right. That's right. And so when I say we, I mean Lee, and I'm now the chancellor.
What's the chancellor?
Well, depends on who you ask.
What's the definition of a chancellor?
The definition of a chancellor is a high-ranking senior official of a college or university.
I know on the Pink Panther movies, he's always going to talk to the chancellor.
Okay. All right, well, think about this. In Germany,
yeah,
the head of government,
yeah,
what was Adolf Hitler? He was the chancellor.
The chancellor, that's right.
And Merkel, Angela Merkel, she's the chancellor.
Yeah.
So they don't have a president like we do, a prime minister like England. They have a chancellor. So there's a chancellor. Yeah. All right, now think about this. University of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So people here around in Cleveland, they hear what's going on down to UTC. A guy named Steve Engel doing a very fine job down there as the top guy at UTC. He's the chancellor. He's not the president. He's the chancellor. The president's up in Knoxville, right? Mm. So you got a president of the system, University of Tennessee system, and then the Knoxville campus, where the Big Orange play, they have a chancellor. Chattanooga's got a chancellor, so on. So the point is, chancellor can mean a lot of different things. Well, what does it mean at Lee? And the answer is, we're still working that out. But the president's the top guy, and we have a new president. His name is Mark Walker. You ought to get him to come on, man. Now, he'd talk a whole different He's had a whole different life
Yeah, I
from mine.
Now,
But
so
now he'll be the president, and he's the top guy.
So in other words, you're the chancellor's almost like consultant.
Well, yeah, sort of. Honestly, we don't know because it's different. Chancellor means different things, different places. All we know is I'm still very much in there. I'm still in the mix.
Yeah.
And I would not have stepped aside as president and become chancellor if it was going to be nothing. So I'll be working.
Because you being a Clevelander, being proud of Lee College, and thinking that you should have gotten a good deal in Mayfield.
Yeah.
Same thinking,
Of
right?
course, yeah. And so I'm not going to let. So when I say we going to do this
Yeah,
over at Mayfield, I mean when I say we, you say who's we? I guess it's me and the president
Yeah.
because he's the boss. He's the top guy. He's the CEO.
The lightning rod.
Yeah, but I'm the one that's going to get Mayfield done.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that big project we got out there, on that track and field project, multi-sport project.
that looks
on the
good,
park.
doesn't it?
That's going to be a game changer for young people in Cleveland, Bradley County that are interested in those sports. Okay, that's on me. You know, I didn't, when I stepped down as president and became chancellor, I didn't then hand this over to Dr. Walker and say, okay, sir, it's all yours. God bless you. You know,
You didn't do like you didn't just. In other words, you're easing out.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not just turning running.
That's right. So when the president of the United States changes, when Obama left the presidency and Trump came in,
He was not the chancellor.
yeah, he did not become the chancellor. As a matter of fact, the way that
Yeah,
one works
yeah.
is Obama left his office, and then when he left his office that morning of January the 20th, I guess
Yeah.
it was, and there was this picture of Michelle over there, and his daughters over there, and there was his faithful baseball cap over there, and he had his Diet Coke or whatever he
Yeah.
drinks over there, and he walks out, and they open the door and say, Mr. President, you know, here's your limo, and he gets in the limo with Donald Trump, and they drove down there, and then when it was over, they drove back, and Donald Trump walked in, and it was his wife's picture, and his kids, and his,
Can you imagine that ride after they'd blasted each other?
Yeah.
You know, if I was running for office, I'd have a hard time blasting the opponent. That's just not me.
Yeah, but you'd get used to it.
I
because,
guess.
Yeah, because he'd rip your
I guess
throat out, and then
Yeah,
you'd
you'd have
turn
to
around and rip his
respond.
throat out.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, the ride's got to be awkward though. Now, can you imagine Obama? Trump ran saying, Obama totally screwed this thing up. I'm going to fix it.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in November, of course, but whenever Trump leaves the office, it could be flipped then.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, that's got to be tough. But the way they do that thing is you're 100% the president.
Immediately.
Yeah, and the next minute you're 0% the president. And so that's not the way we're doing it at Lee. So,
Which is really better because
Yeah.
they did not have the benefit of a chancellor
yeah,
letting you
yeah.
ease in,
Yeah.
maybe, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we didn't. You know, I didn't get voted out of office, and this young man that's now the
Oh,
president.
yeah,
didn't
nothing
run
like
against
that.
me.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we were able to kind of.
Yeah.
And you know, the guy that was president before I became president, he was only president 2 years. His name was Lamar Vest. I really, really liked the guy. I worked for him. I thought he had great ideas. He's still a friend of mine to this day.
Is he still living?
He's still living.
Is that right?
He's retired and living here in Cleveland, but he's been nothing but positive and supportive for 34 years. And so I had the good fortune of doing that, of following somebody that I really liked and somebody I really believed in. And I think this man, I call him a young man, he's young to me, you know, his name, Mark Walker, I think we've had the same kind of relationship. And I've known him for a long time, and I believe he's got great ideas and is going to do a good job. So I have no problem busting my chops for this guy. You know, if it's somebody I really didn't believe in, or I thought he had the wrong idea, wrong vision for Lee, then, you know, I just disappear.
I say, if you like him, we love him.
Yeah. Oh, good.
And I've never met him, but he's got to be okay.
Yeah, I
or
believe
close.
I like him. Yeah, somebody told told me one time, the guy was president for a long time at a college, kind of like I've been. He said, handing it over to your successor is kind of like raising your daughter and walking her down the aisle. You know, say, here's this girl, you've spent all these years helping her develop. You've invested in her. You straightened her teeth and paid the orthodontics bills and helped her with her homework. And now she's this lovely young woman, and you're going to walk her down the aisle, and here's this guy sitting there, and you're going to hand her over to this guy and say, okay, sure. He said, that's kind of what it's going to be like when you hand Lee over to the next person.
And you know, that speaks well of him, allowing you to still play part.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, not saying, oh, this is the way I'm. Yeah. That says he's a pretty good guy.
That's right. And if he were coming in saying, look, I know you
I'm
guys. I'm
tired of the way you've been doing
it. I've heard Conn up to here. Yeah. Then we'd have. Yeah. That'd be a different situation.
That wouldn't go over well.
Yeah. No.
Now let me ask you this. Years ago, I was driving to Florida. I'm driving down Dalton Pike. And here comes this black car behind me. I guess it's going too fast down Dalton Pike. And I can't keep up with this car. And I'm thinking, where is this guy going? And why are they going so fast? So I finally kept up till we got to Rocky Face, Georgia. Yeah. And I stopped. I got to see who this guy is. And it was you. It was on a Sunday morning. I mean, you were absolutely
I was probably late
flying.
Getting somewhere. Yeah.
I mean, a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I mean, and I got on the road and you're headed towards Atlanta. I told Tamil, I said, I can't keep up with this guy. I mean, so there had to be times that your job is, if you sit here and explain to me, I would have no clue what it keeps, what it takes to hold it together. Am I right?
Yeah, well, you're right. Sometimes it's a handful,
I mean, do you ever drive up and see the plants and say, man, the sprinklers aren't on?
All the time, right up to right now. And if there's 7 azaleas around this entranceway, and one of them obviously died a couple of months ago, but nobody pulled it out and stuck another one in there, then I wonder, am I the only one that can see that dead azalea?
Well, if I go to one of my houses I build, the front doorknob, if it's the slightest bit loose, because the guy says, why are you worried about it? I said, this is the only thing they touch. Let's at least get that right.
That one,
The stuff they can't touch, maybe we can get away with it. So you're saying they're driving down. I mean, obviously, Lee College has got it's got to be the best. There's not a better campus or well-groomed.
I think you'd have a very hard time finding some.
You couldn't do
where
it.
we keep up with it as much.
And you know, the people mowing the yards, you see them out tomorrow morning. The odds are I'm building the flats for Key Waller over on Maple and you know, so I'm through there all the time. But it would probably blow my mind what it would cost to just keep the yards. I mean,
well, we're determined this campus to be something Cleveland's proud of, and I want Clevelanders to be able to drive through that campus and show it off to other people, guests, you know, family members that come to visit them. I want them to be proud of it. And you know, I mentioned that there was a businessman who'd given me a nice piece of money to help improve the looks of Mayfield.
Yeah.
And you know what he said to me? If you can make this block around Mayfield look anything like the rest of this campus, then I'll help you do it. Well, I
know you can do that.
Yeah, I'll take that challenge. You know, so he got it. You know, he said. I was sitting out there looking at Mayfield, and I was saying, you know, it's like you say, the building's sturdy. It's got good, good bones. Got a lot of good things going on in there, but it doesn't look good. And he said, well, I got to admit, it doesn't look like Lee University. And I said, well, you know, will you help me make it look like Lee University? And he's doing so. But,
well, that's a great gift.
Yeah. So, but you know, it's good to where you can get to the point that the brand says that.
I believe Lee College brand says that.
Yeah, I think it does too.
I mean, it has definitely got. You know, a lot of people live here. There's a lot of people working in Cleveland, living in Cleveland, that went to Lee.
Yeah, I know.
How many students are there now?
A little over 5,000.
Golly.
Yeah. So we have, and we're graduating over 1,000 a year. And so many come into town and stay.
Oh, yeah.
They either come in town and marry somebody from the area that just come to town and like it.
Yeah.
They go to Lee and they like it. They make a life here. And
Tim Waldrop did that, so that's your
Yeah.
your only mistake.
Yeah.
No, Tim's a good friend.
Yeah, no, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, he's a good example. He's a good example
a-
of that. Yeah, he's kind of a, he's an entrepreneur.
He's a good guy. He's
well,
a great guy.
you know, I think so many have. And I thought you were going to mention Kim Castile.
Oh.
And, you know.
Yeah, I built her building over there.
Yeah,
She was,
well, she's another example
did
of that.
she go to Lee?
She
Is
sure,
that
she
right?
came to Cleveland to go to Lee, like so many have done.
There's
And then
not
she
a
just-
nicer person than Kim Castile.
I agree, and she was she came in and she loved this town, and so she gave them all. So she builds a business and it makes it a great business, and then becomes so respected in this town. Of course, to become head of the Chamber of Commerce, and so she's I was always proud of her, and I would always say to her from the time she just started that business, and you know,
Remember when she drove the pink Cadillac?
I don't remember.
That was when she first started.
Yeah.
I remember.
I'd say, now remember, you're a Lee gal, and she'd
Yeah.
say, I know, you know, like I got it.
She was like the perfect person,
yeah.
wasn't she?
So you, boy, what a tragedy that was, and what terrible news to hear about her.
But now you being chancellor and easing out, is this the way it's going to end, or are you going to go do other stuff, or are you going to get some other interest, or
I don't have any other interest.
this is it?
This is it. You know, what I care about is, you know, Lee and my family, and you know, him full of my friends, and you know, the idea of going on. I've heard many presidents do that when they resign from the presidency.
Go to Florida and play skee ball.
Yeah, or go to some other school where the schools will give you a nice piece of money to come in there and just sort of spend a couple of years as a consultant, you know, try to help them. And I have many people come in here and say, help us do what Lee did. You know, we want to do it at our place. And, you know, and my answer is, yeah, but I don't care about your school. You know, I just care about Lee.
You think your success at Lee was because you cared so much about Lee and Cleveland?
I think I did. And so I don't think I can transfer that.
You take it personally.
Yeah, the idea that I could pick up, take my bag of tricks, go to some other school. And I've had many opportunities to do that over the years.
And you know, maybe it's not a bag of tricks, but it's just simply passion.
Yeah. Well, I've got that for Lee, and that doesn't change. So, yeah, I don't plan to go anywhere. They're going to have to haul me out, you know, feet first, so to speak. So I'm going to just try to. I'm just trying to keep a low.
You'll be holding the door while
keep a low enough profile that the young guys can.
Do you see students different today? That, you know, is the mindset different? Is all that about the same?
Yeah, you know, there's some differences, but there's not that much difference.
My son's getting ready to go. This is his first year. He's thinking just like I am.
Yeah.
Of course, they all, you know, they grow the beard.
Yeah,
you know,
sure,
why they go to college? They think they're supposed to grow a beard.
Well, you
I mean,
know,
what is that?
yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to grow a beard one of these days myself.
I mean, why is that? Oh, I'm going to college. I'm going to grow a beard and get some corduroy pants and some hush. Remember those shoes, hush
Sure, yeah,
hush pup. They make hush puppies anymore.
I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, that was on the Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
Meathead had. He went to
Hush
college
puppy,
and grew a beard and got the
Yeah.
hush puppy shoes. So,
Well, interesting place to live and work, isn't it?
it certainly is, and I just want you to know I really appreciate you coming.
Hey, happy
Talking
I've
to us,
enjoyed
and-
it. You said we would just
Yeah, and
shoot the bull, and that's what
I
we've
tell you
done.
what,
I've enjoyed it.
you look. I don't know how old you are, but you don't look much older than I do.
Yeah, well, I'm a lot older than you are, but I appreciate
Do you
that.
do any exercising or?
Nah, I do a little. I have a little bit of I have a little bit of a workout routine, but I don't do anything serious.
You watch your weight or anything?
I watch my weight, and I run a little, and I've always been a runner, and I go with my wife to her, where she works out. She's got a trainer she works out with, so I tag along with her every
Yeah,
day.
do they still have it due to COVID?
Yeah, they're back. They're doing it again. Now they got these precautions, and they've thinned out the numbers quite a bit.
My wife went to that Hannah's, I think.
That's
Is
it.
that where they go?
Yeah, that's where they go. Yeah, and I go down there.
That's
with
Randy
them.
Brown's old building.
That's right.
That's,
So they're wiping everything down, and they're having fewer people in there.
oh, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and
What would be worse is not exercise.
of course, and she wears a mask, but I don't wear a mask, and so yeah, I'm trying to keep up.
So you go to the personal trainer.
Yeah, my wife has been going to her ever since she moved to town.
What do you figure? You go 3 days a week or 2?
She goes 3, and who's counting? Not enough. I'll tell you that. Not enough.
Yeah. Well, the chancellor doesn't have to.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Hey, I really appreciate you.
I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it greatly.